The blood on Ethan Zimmerman's hands was still warm when he saw the dog limping toward his ranch, its ribs showing through matted fur like piano keys beneath a moth-eaten blanket. It was Monday morning in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and he had just finished putting down a calf born with twisted legs, an act of mercy that never got easier no matter how many years he worked this unforgiving land. The year was 1882, and spring had come late to the high plains, bringing with it mud that sucked at boot heels and a wind that still carried winter's bite. Ethan wiped his hands on his trousers and watched the animal struggle up the long drive. It was some kind of shepherd mix, maybe 3 or 4 years old, with one ear torn half off and a gash across its shoulder that looked infected. The dog stopped about 20 feet away, swaying slightly, its dark eyes fixed on him with a mixture of hope and terror that reminded Ethan too much of himself when he looked in the mirror these days. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough from disuse. He lived alone out here, 5 miles from town, with nothing but cattle and his thoughts for company. The dog's tail twitched, not quite a wag but not quite still either. Ethan walked slowly to the pump, filled a bucket with cold well water and set it down between them before backing away. The dog waited until he was on the porch before creeping forward to drink, lapping desperately, water spilling from its jaws. Ethan watched from his rocking chair, the one his father had made 30 years ago before consumption took him. His mother had followed 6 months later, leaving 12-year-old Ethan to be raised by his uncle on this very ranch. Now at 31, he was the last Zimmerman in Nebraska, possibly the last anywhere. The solitude had carved lines around his eyes and mouth, made his brown hair go gray at the temples too early, turned him silent and careful with his words. When the dog finished drinking, it collapsed beside the bucket. Ethan went inside, cut some beef from yesterday's roast and brought it out. The dog ate without lifting its head fully, too weak or too wary to do more than snap the food down in desperate gulps. Ethan returned to his chair and lit his pipe, tobacco smoke curling up into the pale morning sky. "You are in bad shape, friend," he said to the dog, "but I have seen worse." "Hell, I have been worse." The dog's tail moved again, just slightly. Ethan finished his pipe, then fetched his medical kit, the one he used for the animals. He approached slowly, talking in a low monotone about nothing in particular, just sound to show he meant no harm. The dog growled when he got close, but it was a weak sound, more plea than threat. Ethan knelt in the mud. "This is going to hurt," he said, "but it will hurt worse if I leave it." He cleaned the shoulder wound with whiskey, feeling the dog tremble under his hands. The infection was not as deep as he had feared. He applied salve, wrapped it with clean cloth, and sat back on his heels. The dog looked at him with those dark eyes, and something in Ethan's chest loosened just slightly. A knot he had not known was there beginning to untie. "You can stay," he told the animal. "Not much company here, but there is food and water and a dry barn, better than whatever you were running from." He stood and went about his morning chores, mucking stalls and checking the cattle in the near pasture. The dog watched from beside the water bucket, not moving. When Ethan went inside for lunch, he left the door open. The dog did not come in, but when he emerged an hour later, it had moved to the porch steps. Progress. Tuesday dawned gray and cold, threatening rain. Ethan found the dog had crawled under the porch during the night. He set out food and fresh water, changed the bandage on the wound, which looked better already. Animals healed fast when they were young and strong under the damage. He named the dog Rufus, after his uncle who had taught him everything about ranching before dying of a heart attack 5 years back. "Rufus," he called, and the dog's ears pricked up. "That is you now. You have a name, which means you have a place." He spent the day riding fence lines, checking for breaks after the last storm. Rufus stayed at the ranch, still too weak to follow, but when Ethan returned at dusk, the dog met him in the yard, tail wagging properly now. Ethan felt that knot loosen a bit more. Wednesday brought the rain, coming down in sheets that turned the yard to soup. Ethan worked in the barn, repairing tack and organizing his tools. Rufus appeared in the doorway around mid-morning, soaked and shivering. Ethan made a bed of old blankets in an empty stall, and the dog circled 3 times before settling with a deep sigh. They spent the day together in companionable silence, the rain drumming on the roof, Ethan working while Rufus slept. That evening, Ethan sat on an overturned bucket and told Rufus about his life, words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. He talked about his parents, his uncle, the woman he had almost married before she decided ranch life was too hard and lonely, and ran off with a banker from Omaha. He talked about the cattle he had lost to disease last year, the debt he was still paying off, the way some mornings he woke up and could not remember why he kept going. Rufus listened, or seemed to, his head on his paws, eyes half closed. When Ethan finished, his throat raw, the dog stood and walked over to lean against his leg. The weight was solid, real, alive. Ethan rested his hand on Rufus's head and felt something shift inside him, like a door opening after being locked too long. Thursday was clear and bright, the world washed clean. Ethan rode into town for supplies and Rufus followed, trotting beside his horse with new energy. In Scottsbluff, people stared at them, this tall, silent rancher and his battered dog. Ethan ignored them, conducted his business at the general store and the feed depot, then stopped at the saloon for one whiskey before heading home. Old Pete, the bartender who had been pouring drinks since before Ethan was born, eyed Rufus standing alert outside the window. "Got yourself a friend, Zimmerman, seems like," Ethan said. "Good. Man should not live alone. Not natural." Ethan drank his whiskey and said nothing. What was there to say? Pete was right, but right did not change anything. He paid and left, Rufus falling into step beside him as if they had been together for years instead of days. That night, Ethan sat on the porch with Rufus at his feet and watched the stars come out. The sky was enormous out here, overwhelming in its vastness, and for the first time in a long time, he did not feel quite so small beneath it. Friday morning arrived with a wind that promised heat later in the day. Ethan was in the barn, forking hay into the stalls, when Rufus began barking. Not the warning bark he had learned meant a coyote near the chickens, but something different, uncertain and excited at once. Ethan set down his pitchfork and walked out into the sunlight. A woman was coming up the long drive, walking slowly, leading a sway-backed mare that looked as worn out as its rider. She was wearing men's clothing, trousers and a shirt too big for her frame, a hat pulled low over her face. Even from a distance, Ethan could see she was in trouble, moving with the careful deliberation of someone at the end of their strength. He met her halfway, Rufus circling and sniffing, tail wagging. The woman stopped when she saw Ethan, one hand going to her side where he could see now that her shirt was stained dark. Blood, old and dried. "Help," she said, and her voice was rough as gravel, barely a whisper. Then her knees buckled, and Ethan lunged forward to catch her before she hit the ground. She was surprisingly light, or maybe he was just strong from years of ranch work. He carried her to the house, calling orders to Rufus as if the dog could understand, and maybe he did because he ran ahead and waited by the door. Ethan kicked it open and brought the woman to his bedroom, the only room with a proper bed. He laid her down gently and pulled off her hat. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark blonde hair tangled and dirty, pulled back in a braid that had mostly come undone. Her face was sunburned, her lips cracked and bleeding, but even like this, he could see she was beautiful in a fierce, uncompromising way. High cheekbones, strong jaw, a nose that had been broken at least once. Her eyes fluttered open and they were the color of sage in summer, green-gray and startling. "Easy," Ethan said, using the same tone he had used with Rufus. "You are safe here. I am going to help you." "No doctors," she gasped. "No law, please." "No doctors," he agreed. "No law, just me." She searched his face, then nodded and let her eyes close again. Ethan went to work, pulling up her shirt to reveal a knife wound in her side, maybe a week old, infected and angry. He cleaned it with whiskey, the same bottle he had used on Rufus, and she bit down on a leather strap he gave her, groaning but not crying out. Strong, he thought. Stubborn. He stitched the wound with careful precision, the way his uncle had taught him with cattle and horses. Human flesh was not so different. When he finished, he bandaged her and covered her with blankets, then went to fetch water and broth left over from his dinner 2 nights ago. She drank a little, enough to satisfy him, then fell into a deep sleep. Ethan stood looking down at her, this stranger who had appeared at his ranch like another stray, and wondered what kind of trouble was following her. Then he looked at Rufus, sitting by the bed like a guardian, and made his decision. He had taken in the dog. He would take in the woman too. Whatever she was running from could wait until she was healed. He spent that day and night checking on her every hour, changing the bandage, getting her to drink water and broth, watching for fever. It came in the evening, spiking high, and he spent the night bathing her face and neck with cool cloths, murmuring reassurances he was not sure she could hear. Rufus never left the bedside, and Ethan found himself talking to the dog again, saying things he could not say to anyone else. "She is going to make it," he told Rufus around midnight, more prayer than certainty. "She is strong, you can see it. Whatever happened to her, she survived it. She will survive this too." The fever broke just before dawn. Ethan dozed in the chair beside the bed and woke to find her watching him, those sage green eyes clear now, focused. "You are still here," she said. "It is my house," he replied. A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. "Thank you. What is your name?" She hesitated, and he saw her calculating, deciding what to tell him. Finally, she said, "Zara. Zara Winters. Ethan Zimmerman. This is my ranch about 5 miles outside Scottsbluff, Nebraska, Nebraska." She closed her eyes, and he saw relief wash over her features. "I made it." "I actually made it." "Made it from where?" But she was asleep again, or pretending to be. Ethan did not push. He had his secrets too, understood the need to keep some things close. He stood, stretched his stiff back, and went to start coffee. Saturday morning, and he had a wounded woman in his bed, a stray dog at his feet, and no idea what came next. Zara slept most of that day, waking only to drink and eat a little bread soaked in milk. Ethan worked outside, keeping close to the house, ears primed for any sound that might mean she needed help. Rufus divided his time between them, checking on Zara, then trotting out to find Ethan, then back again. A good dog, protective already of this new member of their strange household. Sunday, Zara was stronger. She sat up when Ethan brought breakfast, wincing but managing it on her own. She had color in her cheeks now, and the wound was healing clean. He had done good work, and she seemed to know it. "You have done this before," she said, watching him change the bandage. "With animals mostly. You are my first person. You did better than the doctor in Kansas who charged me $5 and did not even clean it properly." "Kansas, that is where you came from," she nodded slowly. "Dodge City, you heard of it." Everyone had heard of Dodge City, the wildest town in the West, where cattle drives ended and violence was as common as dust. Ethan felt his gut tighten. What were you doing in Dodge? Running a card game. I am good with numbers, good at reading people. Made decent money until I read the wrong person and he decided to make an example of me. She touched her side gently. His knife. My horse. I rode for 3 days before I stopped for help, then another week making my way here. Figured Nebraska was far enough. He could follow. He could. But I do not think he will. He made his point and I am not worth the trouble of tracking. Just another cheating woman who got what she deserved. Her voice was bitter, hard. Except I was not cheating. He was just losing and needed someone to blame. Ethan finished with the bandage and sat back. You are safe here. I do not care about Dodge City or card games or any of it. You stay until you are healed. After that, if you want to move on, I will help you. If you want to stay, there is work you can do to earn your keep. Your choice. She stared at him, those sage eyes searching his face like she had that first day. Why? You do not know me. I could be lying about all of it. You could be, he agreed. But you are not. I have gotten good at reading people too, out here by myself, you telling the truth. Besides, Rufus likes you and he is a better judge than most. The dog, hearing his name, wagged his tail from his spot by the door. Zara laughed, a small sound but genuine. Rufus. That is a good name for him. Found him Monday morning, same kind of shape you were in. Fixed him up and he decided to stay. A matched set then. 2 strays inside a week. You make a habit of this, Mr. Zimmerman. Ethan. And no, not a habit, more like fate. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression, softening. Fate. I do not believe in fate. But I believe in luck, and mine has been bad for so long that maybe it is finally turning. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. He nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude, and stood. Rest more. I will bring lunch in a few hours. You need food and sleep more than anything now. Over the next week, Zara grew stronger each day. She moved from the bed to a chair by the window, watching Ethan work in the yard with Rufus at his heels. She asked questions about the ranch, about cattle and horses, about life in Nebraska, and he answered, surprised to find he enjoyed the conversation. It had been so long since he had someone to talk to, someone who listened and responded with intelligence and wit. She told him more about herself too, in pieces, like she was deciding how much to trust him. She had been born in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children and the only girl. Her father had been a riverboat gambler who taught her cards and numbers before dying in a fight when she was 12. Her mother had worked as a seamstress, dying of influenza 3 years later. Zara had raised herself after that, working any job she could find, using her skills with cards when she had to, staying one step ahead of trouble until Dodge City. I wanted something different, she said one evening as they sat on the porch together, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. Thought maybe I could go legitimate, deal for a real house instead of the back rooms and tents. But women do not get those jobs. We get propositioned and dismissed and blamed when men lose. That is not right, Ethan said. No, but it is the world. She turned to look at him, her face half in shadow. What about you? Why are you out here alone? A man like you should have a wife, children, family. He told her then about his parents, his uncle, the woman who had left. I am not easy to live with, he finished. Too quiet, too serious. I care more about cattle than dances and social calls. She was right to leave. I would have made her miserable. Or maybe she was just not the right person, Zara said softly. Maybe she wanted you to be someone you are not, and that is not love. That is just selfishness. Ethan had never thought of it that way. The idea settled into him, warm and unexpected, like whiskey on a cold night. Maybe. They sat in silence after that, but it was comfortable, easy. Rufus sprawled between them, content. Above, the stars began to appear one by one until the sky was full of light. By the end of the second week, Zara was moving around the house, helping with cooking and cleaning despite Ethan's protests. "I am not an invalid," she told him firmly. "And I am not a guest. If I am staying, I work. That is the deal. You are still healing. I am healed enough. Do not coddle me, Ethan Zimmerman. I have been taking care of myself since I was 15 years old." He held up his hands in surrender, biting back a smile. She was fierce, stubborn, proud. He was starting to realize he liked that about her, liked the way she challenged him, did not let him retreat into silence. She filled the house with energy, with life, and he found himself looking forward to seeing her each morning, to their conversations over meals, to the way she laughed at Rufus's antics. One morning, he taught her to ride his gentler mare since her own horse was too old and tired for regular work. She took to it naturally, her body adjusting to the rhythm with ease. They rode out to check the cattle together, Rufus running alongside, and Ethan pointed out his land, the boundaries and landmarks, the places he loved and the places that gave him trouble. "It is beautiful," Zara said, looking out over the rolling prairie, grass waving in the wind like a green sea. "Lonely, but beautiful." "Not so lonely lately," he said without thinking, then felt heat rise in his face. She looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes, something warm and wondering. "No, not so lonely." That night, he lay in his bedroll on the floor of the main room where he had been sleeping since giving Zara his bed and stared at the ceiling. He was 31 years old, had convinced himself he was content with solitude, and now this woman had blown through his life like a spring storm, changing everything. He wanted her to stay. More than that, he was starting to want her in ways that had nothing to do with propriety or practicality. He wanted to know what her hair looked like loose. He wanted to hear her laugh every day. He wanted to wake up beside her and fall asleep to the sound of her breathing. It terrified him. The next day, he rode into town for supplies and found himself at the general store, staring at a display of women's dresses. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the store with her husband, appeared at his elbow. "See something you like, Ethan," he cleared his throat. "I have a woman staying at the ranch." She arrived with nothing, needs proper clothes. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. "A woman at your place? Ethan Zimmerman, are you finally courting someone? She is a guest. She was hurt and I am helping her heal. That is all, What size? He had no idea. He held up his hands, trying to show Zara's approximate size, and Mrs. Henderson laughed. "I will put together a few things. You bring her in next time and we will fit her properly." He left with a bundle of clothing, a hairbrush, and a bar of lavender soap, feeling foolish and nervous. When he got home, he found Zara in the yard, throwing sticks for Rufus, laughing as the dog raced after them. She turned when she heard his horse, and the smile she gave him made his heart stutter. "You are back. I was starting to worry. Just supplies." He dismounted, retrieved the bundle, and held it out awkwardly. "These are for you. Figured you needed something better than my old clothes." She took the bundle, unfolding the fabric to reveal 2 simple dresses, a nightgown, undergarments. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Ethan, this is too much. I cannot pay you back for all this." "I do not want you to pay me back. Just take them, please." She looked up at him, tears spilling over, and he felt panic rising. "Did I do something wrong? If you do not like them, I can take them back and get something else." "No, they are perfect. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "No one has given me anything in so long, not without wanting something in return. I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." She set the bundle down carefully, then stepped forward and hugged him. Ethan froze, arms at his sides, unsure what to do. She was warm and solid against him, her head barely reaching his shoulder, and she smelled like soap and sunshine. Slowly, carefully, he raised his arms and hugged her back. "Thank you," she whispered into his chest. "You are welcome," he managed. She stepped back, smiling through her tears, and picked up the bundle. "I am going to try these on. Be right back." He watched her go into the house, then looked down at Rufus. The dog was watching him with what Ethan would swear was approval. "Do not start," he told the animal. Rufus just wagged his tail when Zara emerged wearing one of the dresses, a simple blue cotton that matched her eyes. Ethan forgot how to breathe. Her hair was still up in its braid, and she was still sunburned and thin from her ordeal, but she was stunning. She did a little twirl, self-conscious. "How do I look?" "Beautiful," he said honestly. "You look beautiful." She blushed, pleased and embarrassed at once. "I feel like a different person, like maybe I can be someone new out here, not just the girl who dealt cards in Dodge." "You can be whoever you want," Ethan said. "That is the thing about this country. It does not care who you were, only who you are now." Over the following weeks, they fell into a routine. Zara took over the cooking and the garden, which had been neglected during Ethan's years alone. She was good with plants, coaxing vegetables from the hard soil with patience and care. She also helped with the smaller animals, feeding chickens and milking the cow, and Ethan taught her how to handle the horses, how to check for injury or illness. They worked side by side, talking and laughing, and Ethan felt himself changing, opening up in ways he had forgotten were possible. He told her things he had never told anyone, about his fears and dreams, about the nights he lay awake wondering if he was wasting his life out here. She listened without judgment, offering her own stories in return, and he learned she was sharp and funny, kind beneath her tough exterior, resilient in ways that awed him. One evening in late June, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching fireflies begin their dance in the gathering dusk. Rufus was asleep at their feet, twitching in dog dreams. Zara had been quiet all day, pensive, and finally she spoke. "I should probably move on soon, find work in town, get a place of my own. I have been here almost 6 weeks. That is too long to impose." Ethan's chest tightened. "You are not imposing, I want you here." "Ethan, I mean it." He turned to face her, his heart pounding. "I know this is fast, I know we barely know each other, but these last weeks have been the best of my life. This place feels like a home again instead of just a house. I wake up happy. I go to sleep content, and it is because of you." She was staring at him, eyes wide. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I do not want you to leave. I am saying I care about you more than I probably should. I am saying that if you want to stay, not as a guest but as something more, I would like that very much." "Something more," she repeated softly. "Zara, I am not good with words, but I think I am falling in love with you. And if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I would like to find out where this could go." For a long moment she said nothing, and Ethan felt his heart sinking. He had misread things, moved too fast, scared her off. Then she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it is just gratitude or convenience, but it is not. I love the way you are gentle with the animals. I love how you think before you speak. I love that you took in a stray dog and a stray woman and did not ask for anything in return. I love you, Ethan Zimmerman, and it scares me to death." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I have never had anything this good. I keep waiting for it to go wrong, for you to change your mind, for something to ruin it." He squeezed her hand. "I am not going to change my mind, and nothing is going to ruin it unless we let it. We get to decide what happens next, Zara. We get to choose." She smiled then, radiant and genuine. "Then I choose this. I choose you. I choose staying." He kissed her, soft and tentative at first, then deeper when she responded, her hand coming up to cup his jaw. She tasted like the strawberry pie they had shared for dessert, sweet and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably get married," he said. "If you are staying and we are doing this properly. People will talk otherwise," she laughed. "Is that a proposal? A terrible one. Let me try again." He slid off his chair and knelt on the porch, still holding her hand. "Zara Winters, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I do not have much to offer except this ranch, hard work, and a dog who sheds everywhere. But I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy." Tears were streaming down her face again, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, and she laughed against his neck. Rufus woke up and barked, tail wagging furiously, and they both laughed harder. When Ethan set her down, he was grinning wider than he had in years. "We should go to town tomorrow, tell the preacher, set a date." "Tomorrow," she agreed. "But tonight, can we just sit here? I want to remember this exactly as it is." So they sat, hands intertwined, watching the stars come out. Ethan felt a peace settle over him, deep and true. He had spent so long alone, convinced that was his fate, and now here was this incredible woman who had chosen him, chosen this life. It felt like a miracle, the kind he had stopped believing in. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Scottsbluff, with Mrs. Henderson and her husband as witnesses. Zara wore a white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, simple but elegant, and she carried wildflowers that Ethan had picked that morning. He wore his best suit, brushed and pressed, his hair slicked back with water. They looked at each other as they said their vows, and Ethan saw his whole future in her eyes. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Ethan kissed her in front of God and everyone, not caring that people would gossip about the mysterious woman who had appeared from nowhere. Let them talk. He was happy, and that was all that mattered. They had a small celebration at the ranch, just the Hendersons and a few neighboring ranchers Ethan was on friendly terms with. Zara charmed them all with her wit and warmth, and Ethan watched her with pride and love swelling in his chest. This was his wife, his partner, the person he would build a life with. That night, after their guests had left and the stars were brilliant overhead, they stood in their bedroom, suddenly shy. Zara twisted her wedding ring, a simple gold band Ethan had bought in town. "I have never done this before," she admitted quietly. "Been with a man, I mean. I know you probably expected. I did not expect anything," Ethan interrupted gently. "We go at your pace, Zara. We have the rest of our lives." She looked up at him, grateful and nervous. "I want to. I am just scared." "I know. I am scared too." He took her hands. "How about we just hold each other tonight? Get used to sharing a bed. Everything else can wait." Relief flooded her face. "You would do that, of course." They undressed separately, him in the main room and her in the bedroom, and when he returned in his nightshirt, she was under the covers in her new nightgown, looking young and vulnerable. He climbed in beside her, leaving space between them, but she immediately moved closer, resting her head on his chest. "This is nice," she murmured. "I can hear your heartbeat." He wrapped his arm around her, feeling her warmth along his side. "It is very nice." They lay like that, talking softly until her voice grew drowsy and she drifted to sleep. Ethan stayed awake longer, listening to her breathe, feeling the miracle of her presence. Rufus was on the floor beside the bed, completing their little family. Everything felt right, aligned in a way it never had before. The days turned into weeks, summer deepening across the prairie. Zara thrived on the ranch, proving herself capable and hard-working. She learned to rope cattle, to ride with confidence, to shoot the rifle Ethan taught her to use for protection. She expanded the garden, started preserving vegetables for winter, made curtains and rugs to brighten the house. Her laughter filled the rooms, her singing drifted across the yard, and Ethan fell more in love with her every single day. Their physical relationship developed slowly, naturally. Kisses grew longer and deeper. Touches became bolder. One night in late August, she reached for him with clear intent, and he made love to her with all the tenderness and passion he had been holding back. She cried afterward, clinging to him, and he held her and whispered that he loved her over and over until she smiled. "I did not know it could be like that," she said. "Gentle and good. Always," he promised. "It will always be like that between us." They made love often after that, learning each other's bodies with joy and curiosity. Ethan had never been with anyone who made him feel the way Zara did, seen and accepted and cherished. She was passionate and playful, sometimes shy and sometimes bold, always surprising him. In September, they went to town for supplies and ran into trouble. A man at the saloon, passing through on his way to Denver, recognized Zara. He was drunk and loud, calling her a cheat and a whore, saying she had cost him $50 in Dodge City. Ethan stepped between them, calm but firm. "You are mistaken, sir. This is my wife, and you will apologize." "Wife? You married that card-dealing tramp. You are a fool, friend. She probably already robbed you blind." Ethan hit him. Not hard, just enough to put him on the floor. Then he stood over him, jaw tight. "Apologize to my wife, or I will hit you again." The man spat blood, glared up at them, but must have seen something in Ethan's face because he muttered an apology. Ethan took Zara's arm and led her out of the saloon, ignoring the stares. Outside, Zara was shaking. "I am sorry. I did not think anyone would recognize me this far from Dodge. I should have stayed at the ranch." "You have nothing to be sorry for. That man was drunk and stupid. No one talks to you like that, Zara. No one." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "You hit him for me. I would do a lot more than that for you." She kissed him right there on the street, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Take me home, husband." They rode back to the ranch, and for the rest of that day, Zara was quiet, thoughtful. That evening, she sat him down at the kitchen table and took his hands. "I need to tell you something. About Dodge City, about what really happened." Ethan waited, letting her gather her courage. "I told you I was running a card game and read the wrong man. That is true. But what I did not tell you is that man worked for a cattle baron named Morrison. He was a killer, Ethan. Everyone knew it. And when I beat him, he did not just stab me and let me go. He said he was going to kill me slowly, make me an example. I got away only because another dealer distracted him long enough for me to grab a horse. I have been terrified ever since that Morrison would send someone after me, that I would bring danger to your door. And today, when that man recognized me, I realized something. Morrison does not care about me. I was nobody, just another woman in a dusty town. He made his point when he stabbed me. I have been running from a ghost, Ethan. I do not have to run anymore." He squeezed her hands. "You are safe here. We are building a life. Whatever happened in Dodge is done. You are Zara Zimmerman now, my wife, and that is all that matters." She nodded, tears on her cheeks, and he pulled her into his lap, holding her until she stopped shaking. Later in their bed, she clung to him, and he made love to her with fierce tenderness, showing her with his body what he could not always say with words. Autumn came, painting the prairie in golds and russets. They worked together to prepare for winter, cutting hay and stocking supplies. Ethan hired 2 ranch hands to help with the cattle, young men who tipped their hats respectfully to Zara and worked hard. The ranch was thriving, better than it had in years, and Ethan knew it was because he was happier, more focused, more alive. In October, Zara told him she was pregnant. They were in the barn and she just said it straight out, no preamble. I am going to have a baby, Ethan. Around May, I think. He stared at her, the words not quite landing. A baby, our baby. She looked nervous. I know we have only been married a few months, but I want this. I want a family with you. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and she squealed and held on. We are having a baby. Zara, we are having a baby, I know. She was laughing too, both of them giddy and overwhelmed. He set her down and cupped her face. You have made me the happiest man alive. I love you so much. I love you too. That winter was hard, the snow piling high and the wind howling across the plains. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and light. Zara grew round with their child, and Ethan fussed over her constantly until she finally told him to stop hovering, or she would lock him in the barn with the cattle. He tried to back off but could not help himself, bringing her tea and extra blankets, making sure she ate enough, building up the fire until the house was almost too warm. You are going to be an insufferable father, she told him one evening, but she was smiling. Probably, he agreed. But our child will be very loved. Yes, she said softly. Very loved. Rufus was equally attentive, lying beside Zara whenever she rested, his head on her swollen belly. When the baby kicked, the dog's ears would perk up and Zara would laugh. He knows. He is going to be a wonderful protector. In May, just as the prairie was turning green again, Zara went into labor. Ethan rode to town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Henderson, and spent the longest day of his life pacing the main room while Zara labored in their bedroom. Her screams tore at him, made him want to break down the door, but Mrs. Henderson kept shooing him away. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound, a baby crying. He froze, heart pounding. Mrs. Henderson emerged, smiling. You have a son, Ethan, a big, healthy boy. And your wife did beautifully. You can go in now. He entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Zara was propped up in bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him, and the love in her eyes nearly brought him to his knees. Come meet your son, she said. He sat beside her carefully and looked down at the baby. His son. He had a son. The infant was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. Ethan reached out with one finger and the baby grabbed it with surprising strength. He is perfect, Ethan whispered. You are perfect. What should we name him? Zara asked. Ethan thought about his father, his uncle, all the men who had shaped his life. How about Samuel, after my father? Samuel Zimmerman, I like it. She looked down at the baby, stroking his cheek. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world. They spent the next few days cocooned together, learning how to be parents. It was harder than Ethan had expected, the constant feedings and changings, the crying that would not stop, the fear that they were doing everything wrong. But they figured it out together, taking turns walking Samuel when he was fussy, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, laughing when Rufus sniffed the baby cautiously and then licked his head. Our family, Zara said one night as they watched Samuel sleep in the cradle Ethan had built. I never thought I would have this. A husband, a child, a home. I was so sure I was meant to be alone. Me too, Ethan admitted. And then a stray dog showed up and everything changed. She leaned against him. I am glad I followed that dog. You did not follow the dog. You came here on your own. I know. But sometimes I like to think Rufus sent me some kind of signal, led me here to you. Is that silly? No. I believe in that kind of thing now. Fate, luck, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other, Zara. All three of us. They stood there, watching their son and their dog, and Ethan felt a completeness he had never known was possible. This was everything he needed, right here in this room. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who adored his parents and his dog. Rufus was patient with him, letting Samuel tug his ears and climb on his back, always gentle. When Samuel was 3, Zara became pregnant again, and in the spring of 1886 they welcomed a daughter they named Rose after Zara's mother. Rose was small and delicate, with Zara's sage green eyes and Ethan's dark hair. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help feed her and hold her. Ethan built an addition to the house, adding 2 more bedrooms so the children could have their own spaces as they grew. The ranch continued to prosper, and they hired more help, freeing Ethan to spend more time with his family. Life was not without challenges. There were droughts and harsh winters, sicknesses that scared them, moments when money was tight. But they faced everything together. Ethan and Zara, a united front. Their love deepened over the years, becoming something solid and unshakable. They had learned each other's rhythms, knew when to push and when to give space, how to fight fair and make up thoroughly. In 1888, Zara became pregnant a 3rd time, and they welcomed twin boys, James and Thomas. The house was suddenly full to bursting with noise and laughter and chaos. Ethan loved every minute of it, even the exhausting ones. He would come in from the fields to find Zara surrounded by children, reading them stories or helping with chores, and his heart would swell with gratitude. Rufus had grown old by then, his muzzle gray, his steps slower. But he was still devoted, still protective of the family he had helped create. When he died in his sleep one autumn night, the whole family mourned. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Ethan carved a marker, "Rufus, faithful friend who brought us together." Samuel, now 8 years old, cried for days. Ethan held his son and told him about how Rufus had arrived, injured and afraid, and how he had healed and become part of their family. "He taught me something important," Ethan said. "He taught me to open my heart, to take a chance on someone who needed help. If I had not done that, I would never have been ready when your mother arrived. Rufus gave me the courage to love." "So he was magic?" Samuel asked. "Maybe. Or maybe he was just a good dog who showed up at the right time." A few months later, they got a new puppy, a shepherd mix like Rufus, and named him Scout. The children doted on him, and Scout grew into a loyal companion just like his predecessor. Life continued, always changing, always full. As the children grew older, Ethan taught his sons to ranch, passing on the skills his uncle had taught him. Samuel showed a natural aptitude, while James and Thomas were more interested in books and numbers. Ethan encouraged all their interests, wanting them to find their own paths. Rose, meanwhile, became her mother's shadow, learning to garden and sew and cook, but also to ride and rope like her brothers. Zara blossomed as a mother and wife, her past in Dodge City becoming a distant memory. She never dealt cards again, but she used her skills with numbers to help manage the ranch finances, proving invaluable. She and Ethan were partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other's dreams. In 1895, when Samuel was 18, he announced he wanted to start his own ranch on the far edge of their property. Ethan helped him build a house and stock it with cattle, proud of the man his son had become. Samuel married a girl from town the following year, and suddenly, Ethan and Zara were grandparents. "We are not old enough for this," Zara protested, laughing when their first grandchild was born. "Speak for yourself," Ethan teased. "I feel ancient," but he did not feel ancient. He felt alive, grateful for every single day. He watched Zara with their grandchildren, saw the gray threading through her dark blonde hair, the lines around her eyes, and thought she was more beautiful now than she had been at 24. Time had been kind to them, their love growing richer and deeper with each passing year. The new century arrived, bringing changes to the West. Railroads crisscrossed the prairie, Towns grew into cities. The wildness that had defined the frontier was slowly being tamed. But on the Zimmerman ranch, life remained steady and good. They expanded their land, modernized where it made sense, but kept the heart of what they had built. In 1902, James and Thomas left for college back east, wanting to study business and law. Ethan was sad to see them go, but understood their need to explore the wider world. Rose stayed, marrying a neighboring rancher's son and settling nearby. She and Zara remained close, and Ethan loved watching them together, 3 generations of strong women. As they grew older, Ethan and Zara spent more time together, the daily demands of the ranch eased by their sons and hired help. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, just as they had when they were newlyweds, holding hands and watching the sunset. Scout, now an old dog himself, would lie at their feet, and sometimes Ethan would think about Rufus, about that Monday morning when everything changed. "You ever regret it?" he asked Zara one evening. "Staying here, marrying me. You could have gone anywhere, done anything." She looked at him with those sage green eyes still sharp and clear. "Not for one single second. This is the life I was meant to have, Ethan. You are the person I was meant to love. I would not change a thing. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they made us who we are." He kissed her, soft and slow, and she smiled against his lips. After all these years, she could still make his heart race. In 1905, they celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. There were 11 grandchildren now, ranging from infants to teenagers, and the house overflowed with noise and life. Ethan stood on the porch, watching the chaos, and felt a hand slip into his. Zara stood beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. "We did good," she said quietly. "We did. All of this, it is because of you. You brought light and love into my life, Zara. You made me whole." "We made each other whole," she corrected. "That is what love is supposed to do." They stood there together, watching their family, watching the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination, and a stray dog who had shown up at exactly the right time. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Ethan thought about fate and luck, about the choices that had led them here. He thought about the man he had been, alone and convinced that was his destiny. He thought about the woman who had stumbled into his life, wounded and running, trusting him to help her heal. He thought about all the years between then and now, every joy and sorrow, every moment that had brought them to this perfect evening. Life on the ranch continued in its rhythm, seasons turning, children growing, grandchildren being born. Ethan and Zara aged together, their bodies slowing but their spirits still strong. They took walks in the evening, slower now but still hand in hand. They told stories to their grandchildren about the old days, about how they met, about the stray dog named Rufus who had started it all. In the spring of 1910, Ethan woke one morning to find Zara still asleep beside him, her breathing peaceful and even. He watched her for a long time, memorizing the way the morning light touched her face, the way her hand curled near her cheek. She was 61 years old now, and he was 69, and they had been together for nearly 30 years. 3 decades of love and laughter, of building a life together. She opened her eyes and caught him watching. "Good morning, husband. Good morning, wife. I was just thinking how lucky I am." "Lucky," she smiled. "After all these years, you still think it is luck, fate, divine intervention. Call it whatever you want. I am just grateful." She reached for him, and he pulled her close, holding her the way he had that first night she had slept in his bed, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. They lay like that as the sun rose higher, warming the room, neither of them needing to speak. Everything important had already been said in words and actions across thousands of days. Later that morning, they worked in the garden together, planting seeds for the summer. Ethan's back ached, and Zara moved more slowly than she once had, but they were content. This was their life, simple and rich, filled with the kind of happiness that came from truly knowing another person. That afternoon, their grandchildren came to visit, and the house filled with energy and noise. Ethan sat in his chair and watched Zara with the children, teaching them to make bread, telling them stories, laughing at their antics. She was a wonderful grandmother, patient and kind, always ready with a hug or a cookie. The children adored her, and Ethan could see pieces of her in each of them. Her strength and warmth passed down through the generations. As evening approached and the grandchildren were collected by their parents, Ethan and Zara found themselves alone again. They walked out to the hill where Rufus was buried, Scout following behind them. 2 more dogs had come and gone over the years, each one loved and mourned, but Rufus's grave remained a special place. "You think he knew?" Zara asked, looking down at the marker. "That day he showed up, do you think he knew what would happen?" "I think he knew I needed someone to take care of," Ethan said. "And that by taking care of him, I learned how to take care of you when you arrived, so maybe he did know in his own way. I like that. The idea that he was sent to us for a purpose." They stood in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The prairie stretched out around them, vast and beautiful, the land they had worked and loved for so long. Ethan felt Zara take his hand, her grip still strong. "I want you to promise me something," she said softly. "Anything. When I am gone, I want you to stay happy. Do not let grief consume you. Remember the good times, all the laughter and love. Promise me you will keep living." "Zara, promise me, Ethan." He pulled her close, his throat tight. "I promise. But you are not going anywhere for a long time. We never know. I just needed to say it." They walked back to the house as the stars began to appear, Scout trotting ahead of them. Inside, Ethan built a fire against the spring chill and they sat together on the couch, Zara's head on his shoulder. He stroked her hair, still thick even though it was mostly gray now, and thought about all the moments that had led to this one. "Tell me a story," Zara said drowsily. "What kind of story?" "Our story. How we met." He smiled and began, his voice low and warm. "It was a Monday morning in May, and I was feeling particularly sorry for myself. I had just put down a calf with bad legs, and I was covered in blood and mud and wondering why I was still trying to make this ranch work. Then I saw this dog limping up the drive, and something inside me shifted." "What did the dog look like?" Zara asked, even though she knew the story by heart. "He was a shepherd mix, skinny as a rail with one torn ear and an infected wound on his shoulder. He looked like he had been through hell, but he had this determination in his eyes, this will to survive. I brought him water and food, cleaned his wound, and gave him a place to stay. By Tuesday, he was already looking better. By Wednesday, he was following me around like we had been together for years. And then Friday came, and I was in the barn when Rufus started barking. I went outside, and there was this woman walking up the drive, looking even worse than the dog had. She was wearing men's clothes, leading a half-dead horse, and she had blood on her shirt. When she saw me, she asked for help, and then she collapsed. I caught her before she hit the ground." Zara smiled, her eyes closed. "What did you think when you saw her?" "I thought she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even covered in dirt and blood. I thought fate had sent me another stray to take care of, and I was determined not to fail her the way I felt like I had failed so many other things in my life. I brought her inside, cleaned her wound, stitched her up, and sat with her while she fought off a fever. And somewhere in those first few days I fell in love with her. Did she fall in love with you too? I hope so. She married me, had my children, spent the last 30 years by my side. I would say that counts as love. Zara opened her eyes and looked up at him, tears glistening. It does. It is the truest love I have ever known. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. For taking me in, for believing in me, for giving me a life I never dreamed possible. Thank you for staying, for choosing me, for making this house a home. They kissed, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. Then they sat together in the firelight, comfortable in their silence, until Zara's breathing evened out and Ethan realized she had fallen asleep. He held her gently, not wanting to disturb her, and watched the flames dance in the hearth. This was happiness, he thought. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but this quiet contentment, this knowledge that you were exactly where you were meant to be with the person you were meant to be with. He had spent so many years alone, had convinced himself that was enough, and then Rufus and Zara had shown him a different way. They had taught him that love was worth the risk, that opening your heart could lead to joy beyond measure. The years continued to pass, each one a gift. Ethan and Zara grew older together, their bodies failing in small ways but their love never diminishing. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, welcomed new grandchildren and great-grandchildren, mourned the loss of friends and family. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, each other's home. In the summer of 1915, Zara became ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then weakness that left her bedridden. The doctor came from town and spoke quietly with Ethan outside the bedroom. Her heart is failing. I am sorry, Ethan. There is nothing more I can do. Make her comfortable, spend time with her. It could be days or weeks, but not much longer than that. Ethan thanked the doctor and saw him out, then stood in the yard for a long moment, trying to compose himself. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. The world continuing on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. He was going to lose Zara, the woman who had been his partner for over 3 decades, and he did not know how to bear it. He went back inside and sat beside her bed. She was awake, watching him with those sage-green eyes that were still clear despite her illness. He told you, she said. It was not a question. Yes. I am not afraid, Ethan. I have had a beautiful life. I have loved and been loved. That is more than most people get. I do not want you to go. His voice broke and tears spilled down his cheeks. I know, and I do not want to leave you, but we knew this day would come eventually. We are not young anymore, my love. He took her hand, holding it gently. I do not know how to be without you. Yes, you do. You were strong before I came, and you will be strong after I am gone. You have our children, our grandchildren. You have this ranch, this life we built together. I will always be part of that, Ethan. Even when I am not here, I will be in every corner of this house, every acre of this land. You will carry me with you. They spent the next 2 weeks together, rarely apart. Their children came to say goodbye, bringing the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Zara held each one, told them she loved them, and gave them her blessing. Samuel stayed at the ranch to help, and Ethan was grateful for his steady presence. One evening, as the sun was setting, Zara asked Ethan to carry her outside. He lifted her carefully, amazed at how light she had become, and brought her to the porch. They sat together in the rocking chairs they had shared for so many years, watching the sky turn gold and pink and purple. This is where we fell in love, Zara said softly. Right here on this porch. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you, Ethan replied. But yes, this is where I told you. I am glad we had this, Ethan. Every moment of it. Me too. They sat until the stars came out, and then Ethan carried her back to bed. He lay beside her, holding her close, and she fell asleep in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, labored, and he knew the end was near. He whispered his love to her over and over, hoping she could hear him, wanting her to know that she had been everything to him. Just before dawn, her breathing stopped. Ethan felt her go still in his arms, felt the moment her spirit left her body and a sound tore from his throat, raw and broken. He held her, rocking slightly, tears streaming down his face. She was gone. His Zara, his wife, his partner, was gone. Samuel found them like that when he came to check on his mother. He gently pulled his father away, helped him up, and held him while he wept. The rest of the family was summoned, and they gathered to mourn, to remember, to celebrate the woman who had meant so much to all of them. They buried Zara on the hill beside Rufus, just as she had requested. The entire town turned out for the funeral, testament to how beloved she had been. Ethan stood beside the grave, his children around him, and spoke about the woman he had loved for 33 years. She was fierce and kind, stubborn and gentle, brave beyond measure. She took a chance on a lonely rancher and a stray dog and made us into a family. She taught me how to love, how to be a better man. I will miss her every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment we had together. She was my heart, and she always will be. The weeks after her death were the hardest of Ethan's life. The house felt empty without her, the silence oppressive. He would turn to tell her something and remember she was not there. He would reach for her in bed and find only cold sheets. The grief was crushing, threatening to swallow him whole, but he had made her a promise, and he was determined to keep it. He got up each morning, did his chores, spent time with his family. Samuel moved back to the main ranch to keep an eye on his father, and Ethan was grateful for the company. Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. He visited Zara's grave every day, sitting beside it and talking to her the way he had when she was alive. He told her about the ranch, about the grandchildren, about the small moments of his day. He told her he loved her, that he missed her, that he would see her again someday. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he could almost hear her voice answering him. Years passed. Ethan grew older, his body frail but his spirit still strong. He watched his great-grandchildren grow, saw the ranch continue to thrive under Samuel's management. He told stories about Zara to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive. And every evening he sat on the porch and looked out at the land they had built together, feeling her presence beside him. In the spring of 1920, Ethan celebrated his 79th birthday surrounded by family. There were more than 40 people at the ranch that day, 4 generations of Zimmermans, all descended from the lonely rancher and the stray woman who had found each other on a Friday in 1882. As Ethan looked around at the laughing, talking, loving family, he felt overwhelming gratitude. This was Zara's legacy, their legacy, proof that love could create something lasting and beautiful. That night, after everyone had left, Ethan walked up to the hill one last time. His legs ached, and he moved slowly, but he made it to the graves of Rufus and Zara. He sat down between them, leaning back against Rufus's headstone, and looked up at the stars. "I kept my promise," he said quietly. "I stayed happy. I kept living, but I am tired now and I miss you both so much. I think it is almost time for me to come home." The wind rustled through the grass, warm and gentle, and Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about that Monday morning when Rufus had appeared, about that Friday afternoon when Zara had collapsed in his arms. He thought about every day in between and every day since, all the moments that had made up his life. It had been a good life, a blessed life, full of love and laughter and purpose. He felt a peace settle over him, deep and complete. The stars shone above, the prairie stretched out below, and Ethan Zimmerman let himself rest. When Samuel found him the next morning, he was smiling, his hand outstretched toward Zara's grave as if reaching for her. They buried him beside his wife. the 3 graves marking the foundation of the Zimmerman family. At the funeral, Samuel told the story his father had told so many times about the rancher who took in a stray dog on Monday, and by Friday a stray woman followed, and the cowboy kept both. He told how that simple act of kindness had changed everything, had created a legacy of love that would continue for generations. The ranch remained in the family, passed down from parent to child, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. But the heart of it, the beginning of everything, was always those first few weeks in 1882, when 3 lost souls found each other and decided to become a family. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Nebraska prairie, you could almost hear it. The sound of a dog barking, a woman laughing, a man speaking words of love. The echoes of a life well lived, of a love that transcended time, of the truth that sometimes the best things in life come when we open our hearts to strangers in need. The Zimmerman Ranch stood as testament to that truth, a living monument to the rancher, the dog, and the woman who proved that family is not always something you are born into, but something you can create with courage, compassion, and unwavering love.